And next, we are very lucky to have Joshua Rauh, an Evanston resident, who is going to lead us out of the wilderness on pensions. Mr. Rauh received his PhD in 2004 from MIT with his dissertation Pensions, Corporate Finance, and Public Policy, which won him the 2004 National Tax Association Dissertation Award. He is currently at Kellogg, and I called him cold and asked for help, and here he is, as all Evanstonians come to the call of the city, and I very much appreciate your being here tonight. Pensions are our biggest problem, and we'd appreciate any help you can give us.
Thanks, Mayor Tisdall. It's a pleasure to be here to discuss this critical issue. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give a financial perspective on police and fire pensions in the city of Evanston. And first I'm going to start out with just a little bit of background. This is the 50 U.S. states, and what this shows here, this is all states together. And the reason why I'm starting out with this is I want to show that Evanston is not alone in its problems. These are state pensions that I'm showing you here, and this is the amount of annual money that the state pension funds of all the 50 states combined are going to owe pensioners going forward. And I have three lines here that I like to talk about. There's the blue line, the dashed red line, and the purple line. The blue line is what the state governments would owe if all of the pensions were immediately frozen today, meaning that all defined benefits that people had earned up until now would just be fixed based on today's levels of service and salary. The red line is the way that the pensions are commonly accounted for using government accounting standards. And the purple line is what is actually expected to happen if the systems are run forward. So the actual expectation is that by 2040, states in aggregate are going to be paying out $500 billion per year in pension benefits. Okay, let's get it, narrow it down a little bit more here. Just the Illinois state funds. Okay, so this is again in the context of Evanston. We are not alone. This is the state employee retirement system, the teachers retirement system of Illinois, and the state university retirement systems. And here what we see is that for the state of Illinois, if immediate action were taken today and all pensions were frozen at their current levels, then Illinois as a state would still owe about, well, as of about 2030, about $12.5 billion annually in pension payments. If nothing is done, and the plans are run forward, then Illinois as a state is going to be paying over $20 billion annually in pension payments. $20 billion, the state of Illinois only takes in roughly $30 billion annually in revenues. So this is what we've been waiting for to see. Well, what does this look like for the city of Evanston? Okay. Well, if Evanston froze all of its pension plans today, meaning that we told all police and fire, this is police and fire, all police and fire employees that their pensions would be frozen at today's level of service and salary, then Evanston would still be on the hook for what amounts to cash flows of over $20 million annually by the late 2020s. The way we currently account for it is shown in the red line, but really the interesting thing is what would happen if we do nothing. If we just do nothing and run this forward, then just for current employees, the city of Evanston is going to owe over $45 billion annually by the year 2040. $45 million annually by the year, it's always going to be million, yes. $45 million annually by the year 2040, okay? And now we do have some assets set aside in funds, so we have $115 million in these funds, roughly, but you can see that that is not going to last very long, and so that is the situation that we are in. Okay, so there's an issue of how is this presented in city accounts. We dutifully follow the Government Accounting Standards Board procedures, where we discount using expected returns on the assets in our plan. And the good news is that we are a little bit more prudent than, say, our state plans. So our state plans, in Illinois, they're discounting at an 8.5% return. The city of Evanston is discounting a 7% return. What I'm showing you here is for different promises of different maturities, meaning how many years in the future is the promise. What you really need to be using, though, and we can't really blame any city or state government for this because the Government Accounting Standards Board stipulates these procedures that everyone is using, but what really needs to be used is a riskless rate, okay? And it's not, the reason for that is not because I don't think it's likely that probably by taking on some risk in our pension funds we could earn a little bit more than, say, the 2.6% yield on a 10-year treasury. It's because the only way that we earn more than the risk-free rate is by taking on risk in these pension funds, and it's risk for which future taxpayers bear the downside. So people say to me, look, what's wrong with these Government Accounting Standards Board rules? I mean, we've been, Evanston has probably earned about 7% historically over the last 20 years. So what's wrong with just looking at these things as being, the cost is 7%? Well, the problem is that what we're doing there is we are assuming that that 7% was earned without taking on any risk, and that it will be earned in the future without taking on any risk. And that is impossible, because the only way that the 7% is going to be achieved in a context where bonds yield 2.5% or 3% is by taking on substantial risk in these funds. And that's risk for which our kids bear the downside. So if I'm trying to explain this to my kids, I would say they're a little too young to understand this stuff. Yeah, they're 3 and 1. But what I would be saying to them is, well, what we're doing is we've promised these pensions, and we're not going to put aside the money to pay for them now. What we're going to do is we're going to invest in the stock market, okay? And if the stock market goes south, which will, by the way, be in the same kind of situation as like your college fund goes south and like any savings we have to help you out later goes south, in that situation, we're going to be calling on you to increase your taxes and give us more money. Is that all right? And I think that what you want us to realize is that doing this, we are basically just borrowing from our kids. That's pretty much it. There are all kinds of ways I could explain how crazy these rules are. Here's the way the rule, the idea that you could use a 7% or an 8.5%, 7% return, it would be the following. Suppose you were underwater on your house. You thought that you owed more on your mortgage than your house was worth. And you had a little bit of savings set aside, a couple $1,000s. You had some savings. What these government rules say is that if you invest the savings in stocks, you get to pretend that your mortgage is not as burdensome because, the stocks are going to earn 11% annual returns. It is completely nonsensical, and within the sort of, I'm an economist by training. I teach at Northwestern, at Kellogg, and this is not something that finance people or economists have much disagreement about. So we are really understating how expensive these plans are. And let me give you the numbers, okay? So if you read the Evanston reports, they say that the total, if I add up the police and fire, I get the total liabilities are about $296 million, $296 million. We've done some work, my colleague and I, to replicate these numbers. We got 291 million, where we're within, rounding error of this 290 and 96 million. But so that's the first number. But what happens if we discount this? If we really treat this the way it should be, the way that a financial market participant would treat it, the way that an insurance company would treat it? If Evanston went to an insurance company and said, "We want to pay, we want to pay you to take over these pension obligations. How much would you charge?" Well, they're going to charge $420 million if we agree that all the pension plans are going to be frozen today, and they're going to charge $524 million, that's $500 million, if we run the system forward and make some assumptions about using these kind of common actuarial methods. But even that is actually really an understatement of what they would charge us if we were going to run the systems forward, because it relies on some actuarial details. I won't get into the nitty-gritty. What does that mean in terms of unfunded liabilities? Well, if you read the reports, and this is based on the 2010 information that came out in draft form in July, the state is 175, 107, or the city rather is 175, 176 million dollars in the red. But really, what we are, if we eliminate this fictitious government accounting, which how much can we really blame ourselves because we're just following the rules? We're really $300 to $400 million in the red here with these pensions. The $300 million would be how in the red we would be if we froze all of the pension plans today. The $400 million is how in the red we would be if we considered that we're running them forward and we use a standard actuarial procedure for doing it. In point of fact, true expected benefits are actually much higher than that. So this is a very heavy burden for the city, needless to say. And I think the question that we have to ask is, how long do we have before we have to act? And the answer is that it depends upon a number of things, including how much we continue to contribute and what kind of returns we get. Currently, the assets in Evanston's pension funds are sufficient to pay for benefits through about 2020 if we earn a 7% return, through 2019 if we earn a 5% return. However, since we hired the new actuary who told us that we needed to be contributing more, still not what an economist would say you have to contribute, we've been making some progress, and if we keep contributing at these rates that we've been contributing now, we actually could extend this out to the mid-2030s if we get 5% returns, into the early 2040s if we get 7% returns. So Mayor Tisdale asked me if there was going to be even a glimmer of hope. That's my glimmer of hope. If we keep contributing at this rates, we actually do have until the mid-2030s or the early 2040s before the pension funds run out. Okay, so, and this, by the way, I should say I give a lot of these talks for a lot of state governments around the country, increasingly more with some cities, and I have to say that the fact that we are contributing, that we contributed $8.9 million for police and $7 million for fire, if we keep doing that, we can postpone, we can kick the can down the road for a little longer, okay, which may be in the situation the best that we can hope to do. So the summary then, how do we put this $300 million, I said the true amount in the red we are is $300 million at bare minimum. If we froze all the plans now, we'd be $300 million under. How do you put that into context? Well, there are 30,000 families in Evanston. So that's $10,000 per household. Okay, I think most of us don't really just have that sitting around. Evanston households are also on the hook for their share of the Illinois state plans, which I wrote an editorial in the Tribune recently, is $42,000 per family. So we've got that problem. And you know, we can postpone the day of reckoning with continued contribution increases and strong returns. If we wanted to be financially responsible, now I'm going to use a big if there, if we wanted to be financially responsible, because I'm not even sure in this situation that financial responsibility is the right thing to do. Because the fact is that there are many other municipalities. Chicago is much worse off than we are. And if we continue to be financially responsible, then Chicago is going to go bankrupt and get big bailout money that we're not going to get. Now, in good faith, I can't really recommend that we not be financially responsible. But the fact of the matter is that there's a question there. If there's federal, state, or federal bailout money to be had, then one has to think about this. So essentially, if we wanted to do the right thing and be fiscally responsible in the in the face of others not doing the right thing, we would have to do two things. First, we would have to stop the growth of the unfunded liabilities. There are only two ways to do that. One is to move to a defined contribution plan for all future work, not removing any benefits that people have already earned. The other is running a new tier of a DB plan, defined benefit plan, where we actually fund at the risk-free rate. Those are the only ways to stop the growth of unfunded liabilities. That would be a pretty substantial increase in our costs. After that, we're still left with the $10,000 per family, and we'd have to figure out how we're going to split that up among current taxpayers, future taxpayers, and city employees and other creditors of the city. I think that when you think about the possibilities there, if we were actually to make fundamental reforms, stop the growth of unfunded liabilities, there would be a scope to be able to borrow in capital markets over a long period of time. And in fact, that is what I generally propose that state and local governments should do, that they should stop the growth of unfunded liabilities either through moving to 401k type plans or through moving to a defined benefit plan where you actually fund using risk-free rates, which both of these that could be very expensive, but the fact is that we're promising things now that we're not paying for. And we got to stop running that up. Once we do that, I think we would find that in capital markets we'd be able to borrow for over long horizons to be able to deal with this $10,000 per household. But I think the situation is not good. I think we can't really blame ourselves too much because we've been following Government Accounting Standards Board procedures. And again, if we go back to the very beginning, that was the last slide I had, but just bear with me for a second if I go back to the very beginning and I show you, what's going on nationally. The same problem is had in all state governments. It's being borne out in Illinois, and this is what we're seeing in Evanston. So, I mean, the question is, how are we going to come up with $45 million annually by 2040? That's going to be a difficult challenge for the city to face. So I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but again, it could be worse because, in fact, in Chicago, if you split it up, it's more like $20,000 per household, and the Illinois funds are considerably worse off than we are as well. So that's the state of affairs in Evanston pension land from a finance perspective.